Hey, you dorks, this is Gunnar Hansen, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you are listening to The Dorkening.
Hi, I'm Brian Johnson, and although you probably accidentally stumbled across it and have no idea why you're watching it, you are in fact watching The Dorkening.
Hello, this is Tom Kenny, voice actor, the voice of the Ice King on Adventure Time, and SpongeBob SquarePants. Ah, meow. Oh, Gary the Snail, too. Hey, guess what you're filling your eye holes and ear holes with? The Dorkening! Oh, I love the Dorkening. Very popular in Ooh, and Bikini Bottom.
Hi, I'm Lou Ferrigno. You're watching The Dorkening. And you know what? You don't like me when I get angry, so don't get me angry. You better keep watching The Dorkening.
Hey guys, this is Felissa Rose, and you're watching The Dorkening.
Hey guys, it's Courtney Palm. We're shooting Death House, and you're watching The Dorkening.
This is Anthony Michael Hall, and you're watching The Dorkening. Stay tuned. My friend's going to show you what entertainment's all about, baby.
The Dorkening.
The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Rise and shine, my sinners. When Father Evil starts his day, he gets a little deadly. Deadly Grounds coffee has the richest, smoothest flavor you'll find anywhere. It's sinfully delicious. Once you go deadly, you never go back. Order yours at getdeadly.com. Coffee's so good, it's scary.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Creator Spotlight, powered by the Dorkening Podcast Network. We have an awesome show scheduled for you today. And with us, as always, Patrick, my friend. How's it going?
Oh, it's going pretty well. This is the first time I've done the show since my 30s, so I'm pretty excited to be here and pretty excited to be spending the evening with you, gents. So cheers.
Cheers. You know, they say it's all downhill from there, so you're all good.
They've been saying that since I was like 10.
Yeah, it's true, but you go with it. Philip.
Hey, how's it going, Leo and BJ? It's good to be back after taking a hiatus last week, and we got a great guest, so let's get into it.
Yeah. Speaking of great guests, Patrick, would you like to introduce them?
I would. Our guest tonight is a very funny guy in his own right, but also hangs around with a lot of funny people himself, does a lot of interviews, has a couple of websites. Ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to bring you Bruce Starr, the host of 80s Golden Age of Comedy.com. Bruce, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Fellas, great to be here. And that lead-in video was about as creative as I've seen. So you guys are doing good.
Not only that, all that music, Leo plays that live. Like as soon as he goes, like he spins around, starts playing the guitar. Like people have no idea how much work Leo puts into that intro.
Yeah, it's I got to put all the instruments back before, while Father Evil's doing his little skit. So it's very difficult to do. But
my question is, do I have to come up with heavy sexual content or physical violence while we're doing the show? Because it said.
I mean, the night's young.
Up to that?
The night is young. Like who knows where it's going to lead us? So we'll see what happens. Maybe undo another button. I mean, that might be sexy enough. Who knows?
Yeah.
Bruce, as long as your dog doesn't bite you, there won't be any violence tonight. So we're all good.
Oh, okay. Shoot.
Yeah.
All right, good.
So I know we have a lot to go over, and also just if you're interested, Bruce does a lot of interviews himself, and there's a lot of information shown us down below or up above. depending on where you're watching or listening to us. And I was checking out some of your interviews on your 80s golden age at comedy.com. But you've worked with some pretty amazing people in your day. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, thank you, guys. And, I kind of feel like old home week because I went to Northeastern University, and I know we have somebody from Worcester, and we have somebody from Connecticut, Mystic, and we have somebody from New Hampshire. And it seems like my freshman year, everybody around me was from those places. So I kind of feel at home. So anyway, speaking of Boston, in 1981, did I just age myself? I was living in Boston for about 10 years. I went to Northeastern University, went there from 71, loved it so much I stayed in Boston until 81. But then I got an itch and a scratch to be in the entertainment industry, and I sold everything, got in my car, drove out to LA. It was no easy feat. And a good friend of mine picked me up at my sister's where I was staying. And he said, "You want to be in show business? I'm taking you to the Improv on Melrose." And he pushed me out the door and he says, "Go in there, ask for these couple of comedians, and this is where you're going to go every night." So I was like, okay. And luckily, the comedians that he told me to get friendly with, they were indeed very friendly. And before you knew it, I was being introduced to all the comedians that were working out at the Improv. We'd be sitting around, sitting with them before they went into the back room, and then we'd go in the back room and watch them perform. And then after they were done, we'd sit around and talk about their set. This really happened for years during the 80s. And this is the gold for me was that in 81, Evening at the Improvs went into production. And this little sleepy kind of place where people would go to hang out turned into a production studio. And they had major celebrities that would come in and host the shows for the comedians. Vincent Price came in, and Jackie Mason, and Phyllis Diller, and Phil Silvers. All these incredible icons of comedy came in and hosted the show. And then it got so popular that comedy clubs exploded all over the country. Every city had a comedy club. And I was in the perfect place because I had a roommate who was a comedy writer, wrote for everybody. And he said, "Why don't you become a personal appearance agent for them? Because the big time agents don't want to do it. And they don't want to call. I'm sure they would allow you to call if you asked them." I said, "Look, I don't want to be an agent. Everybody hates their agent. So I'm not going to be, that you can't, the talent always expects so much from the agent, and the agent can never do enough." But I took the challenge, and before too long, I had 35 stand-up comedians because it was like the perfect storm. They didn't want to call. I didn't step on anybody's toes. I didn't step on their manager's toes or their big-time agent's toes. And I started making calls and started getting them gigs all around the country at comedy clubs. I didn't get them on Johnny Carson. I didn't get them on the TV shows. My particular niche was to get them, put some money in their pocket and get them working in the comedy clubs.
It seems like that, something that was, sorry, I was going to say, that seems like that's something that, based on some of the folks you're talking about, probably wasn't all that difficult to do, because these were folks that were in demand.
Well, I'll tell you, some of them, you had two levels. One level was Howie Mandel was a client. The Unknown Comic Murray Langston, oh my God, was he funny? And then you have Paul Reiser and Bobby Slayton and Paula Poundstone. Then the other guys who were just getting on TV from Evening at the Improv that were not as well known, that was a little tougher because everybody wanted the bigger stars, but they didn't want to pay the money to get the bigger stars. So it was quite a balancing act, and it wasn't as easy as it might sound, but it was an incredible time for me to have worked with and hung out with and became friends and colleagues with all those incredible headliners out of the 80s.
Now, did that include finding like obscure comedy clubs like in Omaha, Nebraska, Cheyenne, Wyoming? You could just name dozens and dozens of smaller cities. Worcester, Mass, for example. Did you know? Was there like some sort of conglomerate that gave you that information where you could contact these places?
Just word of mouth from the comedians, and they would come back from working the East Coast and say, "Hey, I heard about Baltimore. Hey, I heard about Washington, D.C., Garvin's. Hey, I heard about Pittsburgh." And then some of the acts from Pittsburgh and Garvin's would come out to L.A., and I would meet them. So it doesn't work for the small cities because you can't get enough people in the seats unless it was an unusual situation and they could pack 200 or 300 people in. Then I ended up hearing about it. So basically, though, it was the bigger cities that had the best chance of filling every seat every night when I booked these guys.
Nice. Now, would this be possible today with the difference with how Jerry Seinfeld says that he won't work colleges anymore, and there's cancel culture and all that, whether you believe it or not, that the times have changed a bit, and so the edginess on a lot of comics, like Bruce Collin, Collin or whatever, George Collin,
Bobby Collins,
George Collin, for example, all those guys, they wouldn't be able to necessarily do their stuff today in this day and age. Was it easy, you think, back in 81 and after that you worked?
Super easy to make fun of anybody at any time because nobody took it personally. If you go to these interviews, 2 or 3 of the guys rip me to shreds in those interviews because if you know comedians, they would only do that to someone they love, like, or respect. And I'll give you, for instance, Bobby Slayton. This is one of the funniest lines because he would say, I was hanging out with this person and he said, "Say, Bobby, who's your personal appearance agent?" And he'd say, "Brucey Starr is my personal appearance agent." And the guy with him would go, "Oh, I'm really sorry. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" So that was the way that they included me in, and I was honored to be a part of their material. But now it's a completely different story. I'm getting people out on the road in golden age of comedy tours and concerts. And some of the comedians are a little bit reticent. And some of them are saying, "I'm going out there and I'm doing my thing. And if they don't like it, they don't have to stay."
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Leo. Go ahead.
No. You go ahead.
I was going to ask you. You've seen, I'm sure pretty much everybody that you've wanted to see. Who, in your opinion, was the best live performer? Whether it's a big stadium or just a small club. Who is the best performer that you've seen?
So the easy answer to that is Robin Williams. He just killed wherever he went, whether he went on Carson or whether he was in a 200-seater or whether he was in a 2,000-seater. He just killed because he wasn't afraid to do anything. Now, the guys that were Howie Mandel, you guys don't know the Howie that I know. The guy that came from Toronto and got on stage at the Comedy Store and just kicked butt, just killed in the room. I saw him. I went over there a few times, and I was so impressed by him. I said, "Hey, can I book you in some of the clubs?" And, again, he wasn't the world-famous Howie Mandel that he is now, but he said yes. And it was an amazing opportunity to be able to work with such a talented guy. Now, again, Murray Langston, the Unknown Comic, Murray took me on the road with him and my roommate, who was his opening act and wrote comedy for him. Well, we went to Dallas one weekend, and from the time we got on the airplane, he was kidding the stewardesses. He was having fun with the waitresses and the restaurants when we got to Dallas, and it was just unbelievable. Like it was right in front of your eyes that someone can be so funny and make everybody so happy. So those guys were just naturally killer funny.
I remember in the 80s, I think it was somebody taped for me an early Howie Mandel. It was like on a Showtime or HBO or something. And I just watched the hell out of that tape. His early stuff was just friggin' hilarious.
Yeah.
And it is crazy to look at him now compared to the stuff he used to do. It's total opposite.
Yeah, he had a full head of hair,
Yep.
Bushy hair. And there's two things that he did, two bits that he did. One was, you might have heard of this. He put a prophylactic glove on his head until it just got so big, and then it eventually either popped or he let it go. And right now, sitting here, what's so funny about that? I don't know, but
his delivery was just, I remember that bit.
And then another thing that he did was just a riot, which he's lucky he's not like deathly ill, and maybe he has gotten ill from it. He would take a whole thing of talcum powder and throw it on his face and white face himself and become a mime. And he would start moving around the stage with a white face doing this mime thing. Well, I'm sure he heard the talcum powder is like cancerous, so he stopped doing it. And then the other thing that he did was, the Comedy Store is a big wide stage. So he'd go from one end and talk to people and get funny stuff out of them, go to the other end, get funny stuff out of them, talk to people in the middle, and then relate something that happened 10 minutes ago to this guy on this end. His mind is just brilliant. And he's a real mensch. He's a real guy. He's been married to the same woman for well over 40 years. And he's just, the sweet guy that you see on TV. He is very much that.
It's always good to hear that, somebody that you see and you're like, oh man, I really hope that they're as nice, in their public persona as they are in real life.
Well, I have to tell you, remember what you were going to say, but I really sort of handpicked everybody, and I really didn't take any what would be called assholes or troublemakers, because if you take on like a troublemaker or a troubled comedian, when they go on the road, it can get nasty. It can get complicated. They can do some things maybe because they were drunk or high or whatever it was. And so I was actually pretty picky about who I took. Now, if you want to hear about how particular I was, when I had about 35 stand-up comedians, one day I get this manila envelope in the mail, and I take these pictures out, and it's this woman, and the pictures are really blurry. And she sent me like a resume she appeared in a couple of places. She's from New Orleans. And there was no way that I could represent her, because here was a New Orleans comic with not a lot of exposure, not a lot of experience. So I had to send the envelope back to Ellen and say, listen, Ellen, I'm sorry, I can't, Ellen DeGeneres, I'm sorry, I can't represent you now. Now, some people would say, what an idiot. Well, you know what? By the time she got to where she was, she probably went through 10 agents, and I would have been left behind. I wasn't an idiot, but it was just interesting time. I got a picture of her right here in the drawer with that sort of like unfocused picture that she sent around.
That's awesome. Well, the question I was going to ask is, what do you feel is like the hardest type of comedy to perform? Like, would you say it's improv? Would you say it's, like stand up? Would you say it's, scripted stuff where you know what you're going to do and you're anticipating getting heckled from the audience and it kind of throws you off? Like, what do you think is the most difficult?
So that's a very good question. For me, and I was never a stand-up, nor did I choose to want to be. For me to do improv completely off the cuff, I don't know how they do it, but Robin Williams came into the improv all the time at 11:30 and went right on stage and brought one or two guys with him and just created right there. Just created. Now, in another instance, there was a guy who, Bud Friedman is the owner, and Mark Lenow, the owner of the Improv. And there was a guy, I'll let you know his name in a moment, who came in and he said to Bud, I'm going on a show. Can I work on my characters? So for 2 weeks, he worked on all these characters, and man, was he funny. And then Billy Crystal went on Saturday Night Live with those characters. So that's another type. Another type is that some of these comedians, it might take them 10 years until they feel confident about, really getting out there and really pushing to be headliners. So now, do they worry about hecklers? They don't worry about hecklers because they probably have 2 or 3 set lines that they can use to quiet them that really embarrasses the heckler. And if it's a real drunk, the bouncers get them out of there eventually. So nobody worries about hecklers, but they do have an inventory of retorts about how to handle hecklers. So again, some guys get up there and they have a set act, and as long as they're funny, they stick to it. But others can't do that. Others want to be current. They're writing every day. They're out there. When I used to go to the Improv, they would take their tape recorder, the old days, and put it on the bar stool and just turn it on and just record their set and see what jokes worked. Because the Improv was a place where you can try stuff out for the Carson show, for Merv Griffin, and let me tell you something. When I was there, that's where all the producers, casting directors, all came to find the next Tim Allen, the next Roseanne, and they found them. And it was amazing to see the guys. Jim Carrey. I saw Jim Carrey on the Improv very, very early in his career. He was spectacular. And I said, wow, that's one guy to watch. And, I guess I wasn't a genius, but he was super, super talented. Some of these guys are just wild on stage and just go at it. And some of them are super structured and, a little bit more tentative.
Now, I had a question for you. You mentioned that you only took on certain types of clients because obviously the bleep holes or the people that have behavioral health issues, for example. How did you make sure to do that? Because back in the 80s, and I won't name any names, but we know there was a few, one major comic, he passed because of some drugs and stuff. And then other people have been known to have behavioral health issues. How did you... what happens if they got big or someone that was that you were representing, and then suddenly something happens like that? What do you do to help? Because obviously you're friends with these folks, but also you want to keep them straight and narrow so they can get jobs, and be who they're supposed to be.
So let me answer the first part of the question. The first part of the question was the comedians all talked, and it was since I was with them, hanging out with them. They didn't say, oh, Bruce Starr, the agent, is here. They talked. And so I listened. But they weren't like snitching on anybody. They would say, oh, my God, did you hear Joe got really loaded and couldn't even finish his set the other night? So I just knew that I wanted to keep my collection of comics as clean. I don't want to use the word pure because nobody was pure. But I wanted to keep the collection as healthy as possible because I wanted to have as little hassles and as fewer problems as I could get, because I know that the industry is problematic. And if I could stay away from and resist the real problematic comedians, like for instance, the Comedy Store was a little bit more famous up on Sunset for having wilder comedians. You could look in the documentaries that they have out on the Comedy Store. Those guys are really on the wild side. it wasn't like that at the Improv. I'm not saying people were super clean, but it just wasn't. They weren't like weirded out and wild out and high as a kite at the Improv. And the other thing that people like Jay Leno and Paul Reiser and Jerry Seinfeld would tell the younger or less experienced comedians, to don't get so dirty. Try to resist cursing up a storm, because anybody could curse to get a joke. But if you want to get on Carson, and that was the apex, your parents didn't think you were a comedian until you were on Carson. And the fact is that once you were on Carson and killed, some of the comedians that reported back to me said they never had to pick up a phone again to work, and worked for years and years and years. Frank Sinatra found them. Barry Manilow found them. Engelbert Humperdinck found them. So the two things that they don't do now is keep it clean. I mean, again, anybody can say the F word or the shit word. Oh, the shit. And get a laugh. But the tough part is to get a laugh without using the blue language.
And there's very few guys, like just off the top of my head, if I were to think, I would say Jim Gaffigan is not his earlier stuff. His earlier stuff, he was a little blue, but Stephen Wright, definitely a guy who...
Yeah, Stephen Wright, yeah.
You know, Mitch Hedberg, I think, is another guy who never really, you know, not often he would swear a lot, but yeah, like I can see where sometimes you sprinkle something in where somebody's not expecting it. That I think, as opposed to like an Eddie Murphy raw, you know.
Sure, and you know, and the other one that everybody looks up to, they name Jay, but they all say Richard Pryor. They all say Richard Pryor. Yep. And, you know, Richard could be pretty colorful. There's no doubt about it. He used to curse up a storm and very, very hard hitting. But, you know, it made sense when he used colorful language. And it sort of made sense when Eddie Murphy used colorful language. I mean, you know, that bit that he did, I don't know if you guys grew up with The Good Humor Man or like Bungalow Bar, but that bit that he did when the ice cream man would come down the block and you hear the music and he would stop.
My wife actually quoted that today because we stopped at Dairy Queen after she got her first COVID shot. She's like, "You got me ice cream."
And screaming, "Ice cream!" Screaming for his mom to give him money. So, I mean, those guys, what they did were, you know, prices. Eddie Murphy, of course, I didn't mention him before. I mean, you know, I keep hearing stories from all my comedians who told me that they first saw a 15-year-old Eddie Murphy sneak into Manhattan to get some time on at the Improv and the Comedy Strip. I mean, he was 15 years old, man, when he got started. I think he was 19 when SNL hit him.
I remember seeing something with him doing stand-up at 19, and he was killing back then too.
Now,
yeah, I mean, I have another kind of child story. You know, I get all these great stories from the comedians. So there was a time way back when David Letterman and Jay Leno, I think, wrote for Jimmy J.J. Walker, because Jimmy was already on TV with Good Times, right? And there was another writer, African-American writer, a 14-year-old who was very, very funny. And his mom had to drop him off at the writing session and pick him up later. Byron Allen had to have his mom drop him off at the writing session. And the mom would say, "Listen, we're going to have some beers. Can we get your son some milk?" So a lot of funny stories out of after listening to a lot of these guys.
Now, you mentioned Richard Pryor. I mean, he did actually some films that were dramas and not comedies, such as Blue Collar. Robin Williams, you mentioned, he did Good Will Hunting. You mentioned Jim Carrey, and he did Truman Show. Could you tell if someone was that more talented than just being a comedian? Because some of them, as I just mentioned, and you mentioned them already, all cross over to drama, real like Academy Award type stuff. Could you tell?
No, because I was strictly focused on personal appearances and comedy. Now, when I had Howie Mandel at my height, he was on St. Elsewhere. So he was already on St. Elsewhere. It was a fairly popular doctor show back then. And what was amazing was he would, Johnny Carson would ask him to come on all the time. Number one, because he was funny. But number two, every time he went on, St. Elsewhere's ratings went up a point. So they would have Howie on every like 5 or 6 weeks. And at the end of, if you remember what would happen, after the comedian would finish and it would be the end of the show, they'd say, "So are you going to be performing anywhere, Howie?" And he would talk about the gigs I got him. So I had nothing to do with his fame. Howie, I'll never take credit for anything to do with your fame. Because again, I was an agent for personal appearances, and I was not judging anyone in any way, shape, or form about their acting ability. But good question, though. Good question.
You mentioned agent, and you might have said something earlier, but I know you talk a lot the difference between agent and manager.
Very big difference.
Yeah. Would you like to explain that?
Absolutely. So an agent, a comedian can have 5 different agents. He can have an agent for commercials. He can have a voiceover agent. Howie Mandel was like Bobby on those cartoons.
Bobby's World. Yep.
You guys would know that, but I'm not that familiar. And you'd have a theatrical agent for sitcoms to get you in the movies. And then you'd have a personal appearance agent. Then you could have a lawyer, an entertainment lawyer, and you could have a publicist. And so when you say, gee, you have to give a piece of the pie to all those people are all getting him work. Even the lawyers, they speak to the high-level people and say, hey, a high-level producer, my guy, Howie Mandel would be great for your movie. Done. That's the magic of it. Now, the manager, and I wasn't Howie Mandel's manager, but I'm going to use it because we just used him as an example. Howie Mandel's manager is someone who helps look at all the opportunities and helps the talent judge, is this in the right direction for your career? In other words, Howie is not going to do unfortunately, my podcast, unless he did out of the sweetness of his heart. Actually, Jay Leno said he would do it because he's that sweet a guy. But if you go to people's managers, the manager's there to build the career, and they prevent the talent from taking bad TV shows, bad roles, bad scripts, and it's their job to take the talent under their arm and together help build their career, introduce them to the agent sometimes, introduce them to the lawyers, entertainment lawyers. So it's very, very different. To be someone's manager of someone who's a household name is an amazing accomplishment.
That makes a lot of sense.
Good question. Great questions, guys.
Well, you also mentioned your podcast, and we were talking previously before we went live that the last year things have really blown up for you in that aspect.
Yeah, because I had a job, and the job I had stopped on March 13th. And, thank goodness for the country kind of supporting everybody for the last year. They supported me. And while they supported me, I was able to do something I really wanted to do. And it all started with me approaching some of the comedians that had a book out. And I figured a lot of the guys would say yes if they had a book out, give me an opportunity to interview them and send around that show. So the first 2 or 3 people I did, they had books. But after I got those 3 people, then I could say, hey, I got those 3 people on the show. Come on and do a show with me. So I don't know if you guys know who Bobby Slayton is. You guys know who Bobby Slayton is? Okay. So Bobby, I've known Bobby, like for 40 years. And Bobby is the Pitbull of comedy. He could be a rough guy. I know him to be a rough guy, but he's also a sweetheart also. So I called him one day and said, Bobby, look, I've had this one on the show. He said, come on, do the show with me. He basically said, get the F out of here. I'm not doing your effing show. Get the hell out of here. Leave me alone. I said, come on, Bob. Come on. We'll have some fun. It'll be done in an hour. Okay, if you do it right now, we'll do it. So I had to get off the phone with him and get on the Zoom and, secure a room and, get him back. And we did a show together. And so that's the kind of situation that, once they know you and kind of like you and trust you. I was a Boston Beaner when I first got out there. I wasn't taken by show business, or I wasn't a drug addict. I wasn't a drug dealer. I'm not going to say some other things that you can't say now, but I didn't fit in anywhere. So it was just out of being a decent guy and somebody that they could trust, the reason why I had made so many connections. And then 35, 40 years later, when I was doing the show, they just came on and did the show with me just because they liked me and they respected me. So now I'm at 40 interviews, 40 shows, 80s, goldenageofcomedy.com. I'm even doing a bunch of celebrities. I did Peter Riegert, who was in Animal House. I did a great 2-part interview with Ted Lange, who was Isaac on Love Boat. Now, most people would say, oh, Ted Lange, he was funny. He had a great smile. This guy's brilliant. He's brilliant. And the things that he was talking about and teaching any up-and-comers was just incredible. All the shows that I did, if the comedians coming up now, wannabes, hear about these shows, they're going to freak, because all these comedians who are highly accomplished, many of them were out there willing to lend a hand to teach the new comedians the right way to do it.
That's amazing.
It's always nice when you get veterans that are out there that, because there's a lot of folks who will look at anybody who's in the same field as them as competition. It's very nice when you have somebody that's like, okay, let me teach you what I know, kid. And, I'll give you a few pointers, but the rest is up to you. Because I think in this business, especially, you either have it or you don't.
Or you steal it.
But even then, you still.
I know you're kidding.
You still have to get up there. You have to be charismatic. Unless your shtick is to just be monotone, and you have to. But you have to deliver whatever you're doing. You have to deliver it right. Like Harry Anderson from Night Court was brilliant, because he would incorporate his, like sleight of hand along with his comedy routine, which I thought was just awesome.
Absolutely. Let me give you an example of what you brought up about the kindness and the generosity. Because when I called this the golden age of comedy, I thought I was calling it because there were so many comedians that came out of there, headliners, and you actually wouldn't know so many of them. Why? Because they opened up for Sinatra for 5 years. They opened up for all these biggest stars, Diana Ross for 5 years, 10 years. They were playing everywhere in the world. They were traveling UFO shows. They were in Vegas. They were in Atlantic City. So they might not have been the household words, but the real reason I'm finding out through these interviews on the 80s golden age of comedy is that the kindness, the camaraderie, the support. Let me give you an example. Someone told me that Letterman, or I'll just say Leno, who would be working both the clubs, when one of the guys came out from Boston, and he said, and he was told to look Jay up, and he looked up Jay and he said, "Hey man, can you help me get on stage at the Comedy Store? And some people would say, hey, listen, if I let you get on there, I'm not getting on there. But Jay and Letterman and those guys, they weren't like that at all. What they did was, sure, let me introduce you to Mitzi, who's booking everybody. Mitzi Shore owns the club. And knowing that they might not get one set, if this guy gets it, they did it anyway. And the guys that were coming up, they would never, ever forget that.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Now you said you interviewed Boone from Animal House and you did Slayton and so forth. Now, would you say the biggest thing you learned when you came from Boston to LA was, no matter how talented you were and business sense and all that other good stuff, was it networking to be able to really get the friendships, like you said, the notoriety, but in a positive way, that you would need to get, to be able to be the agent, to talk to clubs and people would say, oh yeah, you're legit. Yeah, bring him on or bring her on.
Yeah, you guys are asking good questions, and thank you for that. People would say to me, how do you do what you did without having experience in show business? Well, I went to Northeastern University, by the way, and all right. So I did take some marketing courses. And from that marketing and accounting, I started up my own import-export jewelry business. And the interesting thing was I got introduced to these trade shows I travel all across the country, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, traveling all across the country, setting up those booths and talking to people when they came by the booth. And if I wasn't able to get their attention, I didn't have a chance of making a sale. So I was actually in show business for 5 years before I went out to LA. And also, I've been studying relationships, why people get along, why they don't, how does that happen? So I've been studying relationships. So I knew the basic tools of what I had to have, who I had to be someone that the comedians would trust and give a chance to. So even though I didn't have any show business experience at all, I had marketing, I had sales, I had all those experiences. And then I learned how to talk to the club owners, and the guys taught me, they told me what to say, what not to say. So the comedians helped me, I helped them. It was a great, great magical time.
Who is it that really got you into comedy? Like made you, was it a family member? Was it seeing somebody perform? What was it that, drove you? Was it a person? Was it an event? What drove you to comedy?
This is really funny because thank you, Pat. I'm in my living room in Boston in Watertown, and I'm watching 60 Minutes. And they showed this personal manager, again, not an agent, a personal manager, getting out of a limousine with Farrah Fawcett. I was naive enough to go, holy SHIT, that's what I want. I want to be around that. I didn't want to be Farrah Fawcett. I didn't want to be Steve Martin or any of those people. I wanted to be behind the scenes. And there's a part of the story I can tell you. There was a writer's strike in 1980, and nobody could work in show business. Everything shut down. And a couple of the guys that went to Boston University came back to party. And I didn't know them personally, but they knew the other guys that I was friends with. So we all partied together for a week or so. And at the end of this time, they're getting ready to head back. The strike was over, and they said, so what are you doing? I said, well, I'm kind of retired. I'm playing some golf. I used to be in the jewelry business. Why don't you come out to LA? And I said, oh my God. So those two things were, all right, I'm there, crazy enough to go out to LA, drive my car out there and try to be in this crazy, crazy business.
Very cool. So my next question, because you spent so much time with some of these guys, who, in your opinion, was the hardest working of all of the comedians?
Jay Leno.
Leno?
Jay Leno worked 340 days a year. And when he came into town, came off the road, he got in his motorcycle, motorcycled up to the Comedy Store on Sunset, and then I'd be sitting in the Improv and I'd hear vroom, 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 vroom. And there'd be Leno. He put his motorcycle on the street where everybody was waiting online to get in. He had his black motorcycle jacket on with the hat, with the helmet. He came in and he would do a set at the Improv. And then after that, he would maybe travel to someplace else that night and did a set. There's a reason why they asked him to be the host of the Tonight Show. It's very different, the comedy that he did on that show than what he did on the road and at the Improv. But he was by far, and he was married too, but he was by far, to a very nice lady, the hardest working comedian. Anybody would tell you that.
That makes sense, yeah. Because I mean, if he was willing to do 340 days on the road, touring and all that, and then take a show like the Tonight Show, which is 340 days, it makes sense that they would choose him. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And when he got on the show, the guys that were writing for him, the writers and his friends, would say he didn't just let the show happen. He was very much a part of all the decisions of everything that was going to go on, the jokes. He had his hand in everything on that show.
Nice.
That makes a lot of sense considering the amount of experience he has. His comedy was a little different. There was a movie he was in, and I couldn't tell you the name of it, but I remember he was a detective with Pat Morita.
He's not a great actor. Jay knows this, so I'm not. So he probably didn't do any more acting roles after that.
Well, he was good on The Simpsons, but he was playing himself.
Right.
That was a pretty good one. You mentioned this earlier. You said certain folks had specific responses prepared for hecklers. Who do you think, in your experience seeing these guys deal with it, who do you think is the best at dealing with hecklers?
That's a really tough question, and it's really not one that I tell you what, my roommate, his name is Barry Martyr. He's become very friendly with Jerry Seinfeld. If you've seen the B movie, the name of the head B is Barry.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody would heckle Barry, let's see if I could remember this, because I can remember so much of the material. He would say, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, that's an example of a fetus not getting enough oxygen." So, these guys would have to hit pretty low, or else they would keep on, and they would think that they were part of the set. But really, it would upset the comedians and set them off in a way that would take them off their main focus. So it was never, they were never looked at to be part of the set, because these guys went up there. Listen, these guys are professional. They don't need some drunk who's works 50 hours a week in an office to let off steam at the Comedy Store and ruin his experience. So that's my best answer for you on that one. You guys are coming up with some great questions.
Now, we've talked a little bit about your podcast, but give us some of your favorite interviews or favorite one-liners or whatever that you've had on your podcast. Give us a taste for the people who haven't listened yet.
Oh, the funny thing, I mentioned that one, that Bobby Slayton, he just had me in stitches when he said, "Yeah, Bruce Starr is my personal appearance agent," and the guy said, "Oh my God, so sorry. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" So that was like one of the funniest lines at my expense. People should binge watch these interviews because they're not just interviews. They're when I was representing these comedians, I had no idea who they really were. They weren't going to show anything other than their best side, their most professional side, their most creative, their most talented side. But on this show, I got everybody to talk about the tough days. I got everybody to talk about how they grew up, and did their family support them, or did they grow up in horrendous households? And I got to know their real inside story. I got to know how they got to where they went and how they got to where to become a household word. So if there was anything about these shows that are the most like awe-inspiring and unbelievable, is my kind of ability to get the best out of everybody, and to encourage them to talk about themselves. Because let me tell you something, they never got a chance to talk about themselves like this before. Now the podcasts are out there and some of them are getting asked, but in the old days, it was just 2 or 3 minute sound bites. That was it. Nobody got a chance to share anything about themselves. I'm going to tell you one little story. This is great. Really inside stuff. I had a young lady named Kathy Ladman on the show. Terrific comedian. I didn't know her much when I was out in LA. I think it's because she was out working the road and working all these great places. She told me when she was 15 years old, she went to Israel and she met this 16-year-old and they fell in love. Oh my God, they fell in love. And when they came back to LA, to New York City, her father drove her to his place, and then his father drove him to her place, and they were just innocent, in love, 2 young people. So the guy that was her first love was Jerry Seinfeld. And Jerry, she was his first love. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of homework. If you look up Kathy Ladman, when she was around 20, 21, 22, and she had beautiful dark hair, a beautiful young woman, guess who looks just like Kathy Ladman on Seinfeld?
Oh, yeah.
From Julia
Louise Dreyfus.
Yep.
It's true.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's funny where these inspirations come from, and where these things that kind of like, hit you as a younger person shows up later in your life.
Oh yeah. I mean, people are still quoting Seinfeld bits, and people still can't believe that the show that George and Jerry went in to pitch, they finally got the chance of a lifetime. My God, the chance to pitch NBC on a pilot, a chance of a lifetime. So they go in and they're real kind of nervous, and everybody's sitting around. It's just George and Jerry. And so they said, okay, so tell us what's this show is going to be about. And George, absolutely nothing. It's going to be about nothing. Well, what do you mean, George? It has to be about something. No, absolutely nothing. That happened. That did happen. And that's how Seinfeld came about.
That's a great thing that you just mentioned, which is people still quote Seinfeld. I can still quote, Archie Bunker. People quote Benny Hill and all these greats from Jay Walker you mentioned, and all that, whatever. What do you think makes them transcend whether it's a comedy TV show or the comic themselves, to continue 40, 50 years later, to still be remembered, to still have people able to quote them?
They came up with a brand. They didn't call it brand back then, but they stood out. JJ is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if somebody sees JJ now, he's probably been asked for 10,000 times to do his bit. And, he has to do it. But things stick with people. I mean, Archie Bunker, Meathead. I mean, priceless stuff. you have to be able to be willing to try new things. I mean, Mork and Mindy was one of the first huge shows, and Robin Williams was just so spectacular on it. And they were just willing to do crazy things, but not as crazy as and sane as you think, but well thought out and organized in their mind. But it's better than doing like straight, concise comedy. Unless you look like $1 million and gorgeous, it's going to be a lot tougher to find you if you're not carrying on outstage with some incredible characters.
I was gonna say, with some of those, I would imagine some of the Mork and Mindy episodes, especially considering Robin's penchant for improvising and just going off the cuff. I remember there was a scene. I think it was him and Jonathan Winters just going back and forth.
I remember that.
Oh my God! Like they probably have hours worth of footage.
Well, you know what's funny is, and it's actually available on P with Alex. I have the DVD set of Mork and Mindy, and some of the outtakes were just, oh my God, even funnier than the episode. It's just friggin' phenomenal.
Yeah, they took that script, and just like okay. Let's just hope that we get from A to Z.
Yeah.
But what they did was you can't bottle that.
No.
Yeah. Now, Bruce, you made an excellent point there. You said unless you're, you look like Brad Pitt or Farrah Fawcett, it may be a little tougher for you. But you said you were able to go above that, because you mentioned that you made sure they had good appearance and whatever, but you must have saw other things as well, because some of the folks that you probably helped out weren't necessarily looking like Brad Pitt or Farrah Fawcett. So what made you decide or know that there was more to them than the outer surface?
Funny as hell.
Yeah.
Funny as hell. Made me laugh. Steve Middleman. Here's like this, like a Gorky looking guy. So funny. And, Jim Carrey, so funny that, you're bent over in laughter. And it's one thing to be funny with some jokes. It's another thing to be able to, Jackie Mason. I remember one time I was down in Florida. So he went to one of the big hotels, and I thought that they were going to bring people out in ambulances because they couldn't catch their breath. He wouldn't let you breathe for an hour. You were laughing so hard. So there's not too many people like that. And Jackie Mason is one of them. And a lot of the guys that were just funny, you could still see them out there. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be booking talent. I'm organizing right now as we speak 80s Golden Age of Comedy tours and concerts, and I'm going to be getting these guys back out on the road in a city near you. So if you guys know of some good comedy clubs that could support these top people coming that are going to be on the road, you let me know after the show.
Maybe we can do that.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
The Mobile Horror Companion is asking, what do you think of the recent The Comedy Store documentary?
I mean, it was very enlightening. It was, it told a lot of stories, maybe some of them that, might not wanted to get out there. But, what was the most interesting to me was the intimacy when they were shooting the apartment that some of the comedians lived in if they had no place else to live, and they were proving comics and they didn't have their own apartments, and they would get that camera going in those apartments, and it's just a wild scene. So I really loved it. It really got my creative juices together to do more of these interviews. I think that's one of the things that got me going, that and the Improv 50th anniversary. I think after I saw those, I started booking 2 or 3 of these interviews a week because I just got on the phone with these guys, or I got on Facebook with these guys and said, "Hey, man, come and do a show with me," and they all said yes. I've had one person say no.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned Robin Williams multiple times. Somebody actually should look up he was actually a comedian during the 80s, and now he does more like a Robin Williams tribute. And it's like, as a matter of fact, he's doing a movie about it, but it's essentially like the ghost of Robin Williams like inhibits him. It's crazy, his impersonation of him, but it's Roger Cabler. And if you're interested, I can get you his information, but somebody you should definitely talk to.
Roger's good.
Yeah.
I've seen some of Roger's stuff.
When people would see Robin coming in off the street into the Improv, and he'd either hang out with us or walk in the back. If he walked into the back, the outer area of the bar cleared out.
Oh, wow.
And we all wanted to see Robin kick it up on stage.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I know we're running a bit on time. I want to remind everybody that we have information for Bruce in the show notes down below or up above, and if you want to check it out. And we definitely urge you, 80s Golden Age of Comedy, we have the link there, and also to his Bruce Starr Productions. And I think either you said it or somebody you were talking to said it, is your shows, not only is it talking about the comedians, but it's more of being a historian at that time as well.
Absolutely. Hey, let me tell you something. Those comedians are in their 50s and 60s now, and some of them are in their 70s. And I want them all. I want to get them all. I want to record history. I want to record their lives. I want people to know what life was like back in the 60s and 70s. I'm going to have on a bunch of guys that are in their 80s and 90s that were Catskill guys that, one or two of the comedians are still around. I'm going to get them on the show because I want to record history. Because once these guys are gone.
Yeah. I mean, Robin's gone. Sam Kinnison's gone. Belushi's gone. Rodney, Carlin, Pryor.
Eddie Youngman. Yeah, they're all gone. Yeah.
And, those are guys that, I mean, you could probably do your own documentary with all the folks that you're talking about.
Something will happen with this show.
Oh, yeah.
Me connecting with them again and telling, booking them on the road. Something is going to happen. I just spoke to someone today who said they would like to add it to the one of the presentations that they make to Netflix.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
You know what? You mentioned the Catskills, and I mentioned Rodney Dangerfield. He used to do that. You should do episodes that are just specific to stuff like that, like the Catskills comedians, or that would be awesome. I'm going to listen anyway.
I'm going to do that, but there's not that many left.
Yeah, I know.
There's 2 or 3 guys I wanted to get on the show. They're ill.
Oh, yeah.
And some of them, if they're in their 80s, they don't have their
dementia.
Yeah, so I'm doing the best I can. If you guys know anybody that should be on the show, just let me know. Some of the named people, if you happen to know somebody. But yeah, I'm going after everybody that's fairly well known that can tell a piece of Hollywood history.
I like what you did with Animal House, having Boone on and stuff, because he played an iconic character. So if you get actors that weren't necessarily comedians, but they were in comedic films and stuff, that's a great idea too. So I think you go in the right way. And
he did, I asked him a lot about Belushi, and he told me. People don't know this about John, that he was a warm, sensitive, generous guy who was kind of schlubby as he looks. Who knew that he was going to make it like that? But he was just an average, everyday guy that got, that hit.
It's awesome.
I have one final question for you. And Phil touched on this a little bit, earlier. So my question for you is, having spent so much time around these guys and seeing them, pretty much on all the time, and getting a little bit of a glimpse of, behind the curtain, so to speak. What is your favorite performance by a comedian that is not a comedy, whether it's, Robin in like Awakenings or, something like that?
what was the show that he did where he was having some a good time with a young lady in the car and someone crashed into the back of it?
Oh, yeah. I forget the name of it.
He was having oral sex with someone, and someone crashed the car while he was having. Anyway, that was a very interesting. And Jim Carrey in the Truman. The first time I saw Truman, I didn't know anything about it, and I went with my comedy friends, and I'm sitting there waiting for something to happen, but nothing ever happened. And I said, "What? World according to Garp? Thank you." Nothing ever happened. But when I saw them, Truman again and again and again, and I went, "Oh, how brilliant is this? This is unbelievable." I didn't even know what I was looking at first, but Truman just killed it for me. And that's the one that sticks out for me. Nice. Robin, it's amazing all the straight roles that Robin played.
I mean, he got a couple of Oscars. Like, the dude was amazing.
Amazing. Popeye. And then he was able to do Popeye. And
I love Popeye.
And then he did something about some Heaven movie where it wasn't as popular, but
was it What Dreams May Come?
What? Very good.
Yes, Richard Matheson, the same guy who did I Am Legend, used to write for Twilight Zone. It was a Richard Matheson story. Yeah. What Dreams
And then he
May
even
Come.
delved into some horror movies, which was crazy.
Insomnia, 1 Hour Photo.
Yeah, 1 Hour Photo was crazy.
His recurring character on Law and Order.
But what was the name of that movie? Did we come up with it yet? Where a young lady's giving him oral sex in the car, and someone slams into the car from behind another car in a driveway. Slams it. Come on, somebody in the room there. You got to be able to come. This was such an iconic moment in movie history.
I'd have to look it up.
All right. Anyway, I'm sure it'll come right up.
Yep. Phil, any last questions before we wrap things up?
Doubtfire. I'm sorry, Doubtfire.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's right.
Priceless. Just priceless.
There
you go. Thank you. World according to Garp.
Okay, yeah, he had mentioned that earlier, or she, whoever.
That's right. That's right. My last question there, Leo. Yeah, sure. Now the improv versus the comedy store. Did you ever cross over to the other side?
I did, but the improv, if you've ever been there, the improv is a very social place. There's a bar to the left. There's a place to eat to the right, and there was upstairs, and we all hung out at the improv. The comedy store was not like that. The comedy store had like a little bit of a back alley behind all the entertainment rooms, and people were it wasn't as relaxing, and you really couldn't sit around. So since the improv was the first place that I got introduced to, I stayed there for the most part, but plenty of times I went over to the comedy store. I was welcome there as well.
Nice.
Very nice.
You guys are asking some great questions, and it's been an honor to do this show with you.
Well, we're happy to have you. We're glad you enjoy our questions.
Yeah. No, this was a great interview. Because this is the first time we've interviewed someone like yourself, and not only did you have some great answers, but when you came on and you went in and basically gave your bio and what you did right off the bat, it just led us to all the other questions with no issues at all. So that was great to just come on and set it all up for everybody. So everybody who's watching knew exactly who you are. We didn't even have to explain it. That was just great.
Many thanks to Stephen Joyner for putting us together.
Oh yeah,
your publicist, and I'm sure you guys also. So this was great, man. I want to thank you so much for having me.
Well,
yeah, and again, like Phil said, you're a great interview. Like, I only had 3 or 4 questions, and I was able to rip off a whole bunch more just based on how you were describing the things that you've experienced. Like, it's great.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that your answers are like little mini stories, probably how you do your podcast, and so where we were able to follow up, based off of what you said. So that was great. Yeah, you I could see you being a great podcaster. So this is a good idea that you did this.
Yeah, it's awesome when somebody does half our work for us. Like it just makes it so much easier for us.
Yeah.
Now I have to go take a nap because I've worked so hard on this.
Well, you deserve it. You deserve it at this point.
So I want to urge everybody, definitely check out the show notes down below or up above, depending on where you're watching or listening to us. Check out 80s Golden Age of Comedy. We have the link right there, and you can also find his BruceStarProductions.com. But he has 40 interviews right now that are up for you to check out. And Bruce, where do you like people interacting with you on social media if somebody's to reach out to you?
That's another good question. My email is Bruce at Bruce Starr Productions, STARR, Bruce at Bruce Starr Productions. But they can also go to 80s Golden Age of Comedy and leave a message there if they want to. And please go to the YouTube, go to the shows and watch them and leave comments because I know the comedians love it. I also have a Facebook page, 80s Golden Age of Comedy, and go there and click on the interviews. You can catch up on everything. I'm even going to have this interview on my website where it says invited guests. So if anybody just tuned in and they want to see this, they can see it, I'm sure by you guys, but then they can also find it on my site.
Excellent.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely.
Philip.
All right, where folks can find me, they can find me at darkdiscussions.com, which is an all-genre news network. It's updated every day, so come and check out the latest articles, release notices, whatnot. Basically talk about genre film, art house film, and whatnot. So darkdiscussions.com.
Patsy.
Well, you can find me right here. Oh, I did it right this time. On the Throwdown Thursday podcast every Thursday. And this Thursday is episode 250. We will be doing that episode live. So hopefully we're going to have a ton of guests. And, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be taking questions. We're going to be asking questions of the audience. So episode 250. So that'll be 250 consecutive Thursdays that we have put out an episode. We're very excited about that. You can also find me here every Monday and every Friday, except for last Friday, on the Loudest Sports Show, and you can check us out on YouTube under Throwdown Thursday podcast. All of our stuff is up there. We've got some good contests going right now on the Loudest Sports Show. We have a Boston Sports Night that runs till Friday, where we're going to be giving away a whole bunch of prizes for that pertain to Boston sports, from Bruins helmets to Patriots jerseys, Celtics jerseys, Red Sox jerseys, all that good stuff. Everything signed, everything authenticated. So definitely check that out and get in on that. And I think, you can also catch me hopefully soon. I don't have an exact air date, but you can catch me as Will Mouse the Darkling on The Other Side of Midnight, coming up very soon. So I'm very excited for that.
Awesome.
Right. Oh, Leo, one other thing I forgot to mention. We just had our 10th year anniversary on darkdiscussions.com. So 481 different episodes of our podcast, and hopefully we'll go on for another 10 years after that. So.
Angelina says, never understood your sports, but still watch.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Speaking about coming out soon, I just got an announcement from Ben over at Still Token With that their show is going to be coming out very soon. So definitely stay tuned for more information on that. I'm sure he'll have some information on this week's show. And for me, just Google Leo Pond. You'll find a bunch of stuff. Could be true, could be not. But more,
it's all true.
It is. But for all these awesome people here, definitely check out 80s Golden Age of Comedy. And I run a little thing called the Dorkening Podcast Network. 30 shows on the network. A lot of awesome stuff by a lot of awesome people. And you can find me doing shows Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And with that, we'll catch you guys later. Bye.